We preview all the edge rushers for the Chicago Bears next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and happy 4th of July. Welcome on back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe or download the podcast anywhere that you get podcast. And also just a brief reminder that we are donating money this month over to the American Diabetes Association. So whether you can show your support by liking or just listening to it, it helps out. Also, you can buy merch and we'll donate money over there as well. Or you can just add your own donation there. Thank you guys all so much. It's so cool that we can raise money for an awesome cause. So thank you all so much. But this goes to our next player preview. So if you followed us before, we've already broken down the safeties. We've already broken down the corners. And now we are breaking down the edge rushers. So what we're going to be going through today is just kind of breaking down each player at this edge position. And then at the very end of it all, we're going to be talking about the overs and unders, what we're kind of thinking about this position. And last but not least, are we better at the edge spot overall than what we were last year? So talking more about the expectations, because this year, we don't have Khalil Mack anymore. So now, since we don't have this future Hall of Famer, what can we expect out of this group? So without Khalil Mack, even though that he didn't play a lot last year, we now have this as our starting lineup. So right now, the projections, I was looking at ourlads.com, ESPN, NFL.com, and everyone has Robert Quinn, obviously, as the starter on one spot, and then Al-Quadin Muhammad as the other spot starter on the other side. I personally believe that Trevis Gipson is going to get this starting spot, but right now, this is the way it sits. And I know Al-Quadin Muhammad hasn't necessarily been practicing as much as he should. He's still present, but he's Eberflus's boy. He's coming over from the Colts. So some people are saying, yeah, listen, he's going to be the starter. Others are saying Trevis Gipson is going to be the starter. But that's why we're going to preview both. And that's why he's listed right now as the starter. But let's start with the main starter, the one that we know is 100% going to be a starter. But the big question, is he going to be here next year? And that, my friends, is Robert Quinn. So we already know how dominant Robert Quinn was last year. We even talked about on a previous episode, if the Bears are going to trade him, where he might end up going. And there's actually been a lot of interest I've been seeing out on the internet for Robert Quinn, which is good. You'd rather have him have interest rather than people being like, yeah, I don't want this guy. Yeah, last year he had a career year, one of his best of his very good career, with 18 and a half sacks, 49 tackles, 4 forced fumbles, and ESPN has 8 run stuffs. Now, run stuffs, that's a very trivial stat that's out there, but still 8 is fairly good since a lot of people are talking about, hey, he doesn't stuff the run. All he does is rush the passer. He was pretty good when push came to shove at covering that run game. And I believe, too, he was even missing a couple games as well last year, if memory serves me correct, and still with 18 and a half sacks, an absolute dominant performance overall from Robert Quinn. So the big question about Robert Quinn, where will he be this season? Is he going to show up? Because we know that he wasn't at mandatory OTAs. We heard all sorts of different rumors about, hey, he doesn't like Chicago, and we're like, okay, whatever, Jason La Canfora. But now we haven't seen him. So is this just, maybe he was just getting ready, maybe he was just getting set up, he wanted to send a message, maybe Eberflus is going to talk to him and smooth things over. There's a lot of unknown right now. So let me know down in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, where you think Robert Quinn is actually going to end up, because this is going to be the big question. Going into training camp, is he going to be there, or are we going to trade him before training camp at all? Because here's this great guy that really kind of broke out this last season after a 2-sack performance in his first year. He still has 3 years left on his deal, so it's not like you're assuming he's not looking for a new deal. But also, I get a little bit concerned. Even, let's just say they smooth it all over, and we know for a fact that Robert Quinn will be back. I'm still a little bit nervous, even though that I get that he got 18 and a half sacks without Khalil Mack, without Akeem Hicks, but still I get nervous about this 32-year-old. He's going to be 33, speed rusher that wins with his athleticism. He's not one of these guys that has amazing hands, amazing moves. He wins by beating you off the snap. He shows that time and time again, and you look at his career, when he's in a 4-3 and his hand's in the dirt, he dominates because he gets that sprinter stance. His acceleration is just insane. And that's how he gets a lot of these sacks, is just with his overall burst. For those watching, you can see some of the highlights. He's all about speed. And that's something that I'm a little bit nervous about, is as he gets older, Father Time is undefeated. So to me, is there going to be a year where all of a sudden the wheels fall off like it did 2 years ago? So that's just my concern with this. And that's why I kind of lean more towards, hey, Bears, just get what you can for him, and then we'll see. But I think, let's just say they do smooth things over and he does come back for the Bears. I do think that he'll probably repeat and get some double-digit sacks, maybe 10, 12. It's not going to be 18 and a half again. Otherwise, I'm more than happy with that. But I think it regresses back to the mean, so to speak, where 18 and a half is just crazy. So I think he still has a good year. I still think he's going to be good. It's not like he's just going to be terrible all of a sudden. I still think he's going to be good, and I would love to have him back, because if they smooth it over, I think it would be nice to have him, just because I think the leadership would be good in a defense like this. And with Eberflus running a 4-3, I think that Robert Quinn would have another great year, because he can just focus on putting his hand in the dirt and rushing the passer. So I would like, it's back and forth. If he wants to be here and he truly wants to be here, then welcome back. But if he has second thoughts, you want to make sure that the chemistry in the locker room is great. And if you feel like somebody doesn't want to be here as a new head coach, as a new regime, you probably don't want that in the locker room. So we'll see. But like I said, let me know what you think is going to happen to Robert Quinn, because that's one of life's mysteries right about now, is where is Robert Quinn going to end up and what is he going to be doing? But then another one of life's great mysteries, who's going to be starting on the opposite side of Robert Quinn? Because right now it's Al-Quadin Muhammad, or people are suggesting that it's most likely going to be him. Now, he's not a big household name, but the Chicago Bears did sign him to a 2-year, $10 million deal. And last year was his first year being the starter for the Indianapolis Colts, where he racked up 6 sacks, 48 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 6.5 run stuffs, according to ESPN. Now, I didn't really hear much about him, and rightfully so, just because he was a 5-year vet for the Indianapolis Colts, and last year was really his first year being a starter. Until then, he was really more of a pass rush specialist, but he didn't really put up a lot of the stats that you would expect for somebody that's kind of going out there on third down. It wasn't like he was playing a couple hundred snaps. He was still playing around 400 snaps, which is around the same amount that Trevis Gipson had, where Trevis Gipson last year had 489 snaps, while also Al-Quadin Muhammad last year had 800 snaps. But even before then, he was getting 400, 300 types of snaps. So still some good snap counts, even though that he wasn't technically the starter. But some other things, what can I tell you about Al-Quadin Muhammad? After watching his tape, it didn't wow me. Am I going to say that he's bad? No. Am I going to say he's good? No. I'd say he's kind of like that Bilal Nichols. You remember last year, Bilal Nichols never wowed you with anything, but you knew he was a solid player that was at that interior defensive line spot. Al-Quadin Muhammad obviously plays more of the edge spot, and I don't think he's bad, but I do think that you can definitely upgrade that spot, and that's what I'm hoping out of Trevis Gipson, is that we can have that upgrade rather than an Al-Quadin Muhammad who we've seen 5 years in the league, and he's been solid. He's been a very solid player, so I like that we got him at a fairly cheap deal, I guess you could say, at 2 years, $10 million. And he can be a starter, but he can also give you a lot of really good depth depth off the bench if you end up needing something like that. But one thing that I want to call out too, because I haven't seen this stat out there, I had to find it out there on PFF, that he was first for the most assisted tackles at the edge position. What that shows me is it just shows that fire, that desire to make the plays, that hits mentality of just constantly running down the people. So I think that you bring somebody over here that has shown, hey, assisted tackles you're just gang tackling. You're jumping on the pile, you're helping somebody out, and that's what you want on this team. So to me, I like him as kind of that first down player, because we'll talk about this with Trevis Gipson. He didn't necessarily show the best at covering the run. So maybe you have Al-Quadin Muhammad out there for more of the run plays. Yes, he was kind of a pass rush specialist, but he really shows that he can control the run a little bit better than what a Trevis Gipson has shown so far. So personally, I want Trevis Gipson to be second and third down type of guy, and then Al-Quadin Muhammad being more of the typical run situation type of player, because he seems to be better at that than a Trevis Gipson. But I'm not expecting double-digit sacks out of him because, like I said, he hasn't done that. Even when he was a pass rush specialist, didn't really show that on tape too much. So let's go back to it. Let's actually bring up the person that we've already been talking about, the backup that is trying to take the starting job away from Al-Quadin Muhammad. As far as we know, it seems like he has to win it away. And that is one of my personal favorites, Trevis Gipson. Because last year, Trevis Gipson on 489 snaps had even better production than Al-Quadin Muhammad. 7 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and also he was charted at a 19.3% win rate, pass rush win rate. And Al-Quadin Muhammad's was, I believe, 14 or about 15. So you're talking about a pretty big jump when you go over to Trevis Gipson in pass rush situations. And PFF gave him a grade of 87, which is borderline elite at the pass rush perspective. And I remember looking at, just as I was prepping for this, you see how good Trevis Gipson is when you know it's a pass, because you see that he's just this big physical guy that is learning how to just rush the passer, blow past some of these people. And you saw this huge jump from him this year or last year, because if you remember, he really didn't play at all his first year. And I still laugh about this, that a lot of scouting reports said, if you draft him, it's a redshirt year the first year, and then you start to see the dividends the second year. And that's exactly what we saw here. He's somebody who goes after the ball, which is what we want to see. He's somebody who has shown a lot of progression, and he's going back to his original position as a 4-3 defensive player. So I'm excited to see him, because now he doesn't have to worry about dropping in coverage. He wasn't a coverage guy. So now you're hoping that, hey, put your hand in the dirt and attack. That's what he's used to doing. That's what he wants to be doing. And at 6'4", 263, he's a big, speedy guy that can definitely plow through a lot of these players. But the big question is, can he do it all? I don't have it up in front of me, but I remember seeing his run defense grade in PFF. He might have been borderline elite rushing the passer, but covering the run was rather poor. And it shows up also on the tape as well, where there's a lot of times that he's just out of position. He's not sealing the edge. He's just not doing what you would want for a run stuffer. But we saw a lot of progression from year 1 to year 2. Are we going to see another big leap in year 2 to year 3? And that's why I'm excited about it, because I just want to see what he can do. And low key, he was also the only one out of Al-Quadin Muhammad and Robert Quinn to show up for picture day. So maybe that has something to say about maybe he is going to be the starter. But yeah, that's grasping at straws at least. So we'll see what he does with his hand in the dirt. Is he just going to be a pass rush specialist, or is he going to be more of a starter? Personally, I want to see him as the guy. You have him and Al-Quadin Muhammad for 2 more years together. I personally want to see Trevis Gipson play more, because his ceiling to me is so much higher. Al-Quadin Muhammad, I feel like he's kind of at his ceiling. He's already been in this scheme. While I think with Trevis Gipson, we can see a whole lot more out of him rather than Al-Quadin Muhammad, who just kind of gives you, like I said, okay production, but not bad production at the position. So we have kind of this 3-team pass rushing ability, and I like that. I like that you kind of have these 3 good players that you feel confident about. But we just cut Jeremiah Tachu not too long ago, the other pass rusher that we were going to have on this team, but he's no longer here. And this next player might be a big reason why we don't see a Tachu anymore, besides all the salary cap. And that would be one Dominique Robinson. Dominique Robinson, the rookie out of Miami of Ohio, 5th round pick 174. We've already kind of heard some of this stuff where the former wide receiver, former quarterback, this pure athlete out there at the edge position. I really am excited to see him when it comes to training camp, because we're already hearing that he's doing very well inside of OTAs. But key thing, there's no pads. There's no pads. It's all different until he gets smacked in the mouth, right? Like, we know that he's an amazing athlete, and it shows up on tape. So for us, we just have to see when he's being blocked, does he have the moves to get around people? He really wasn't coached too much. He's a raw prospect. I wish I could show all the different stats and like try to impress you with, here's all the production that he had at Miami of Ohio, but he really didn't have that much production. He's really a projection at the position. So my big question is, how much will he actually play for the Chicago Bears? To me, I don't expect him to get a lot of play time. I think if he's out there, it says more about him than anything else. And actually, Trevis Gipson even mentioned this, that Dominique Robinson kind of reminds him of him because you have this raw prospect. Trevis Gipson definitely had more experience at the position at that, defensive line rather than somebody who was a wide receiver. But Trevis Gipson even said, hey, listen, this guy's farther along than I am. And that turned a lot of heads. That turned a lot of people saying, well, maybe we got something out of this player. Maybe we should expect something. But I think right now, let's not expect anything too crazy, because if Robert Quinn is here, we don't necessarily need Dominique Robinson because we already have kind of this stable of 3 pass rushers, and maybe Robinson just kind of finds his way, sneaks his way into some snaps, similar to like what a Trevis Gipson did in his first year. So we're watching him during the preseason. That's going to be somebody definitely to watch to see just how he plays. But I definitely wouldn't expect too much for him this year. But now we get to the third stringers. Everybody's favorite part, right? We get into the third stringers, and right now our third string is set as Charles Snowden and Sam Kamara. We already know a little bit about Sam Kamara. He has kind of that inside-outside versatility. Unfortunately, he played a lot last year, and he wasn't that great. I don't think he's going to necessarily be vaulted up anywhere. I think he's going to be battling for a practice squad spot. Same thing with Charles Snowden as well. And I know that a lot of people have said, what about Snowden? Because Snowden was somebody that was supposed to go, I think, around the 3rd round last year, and he became undrafted. Right now, there's not a lot of talk about Charles Snowden because you see a player like Dominique Robinson, who is playing with the ones in OTAs a little bit, and Snowden just kind of fell at the wayside. So it's not saying that Snowden's going to be gone, but Snowden is I see him more as a 3-4 type of linebackers that can stand up because he's got that versatility, kind of like a Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd, you wouldn't want just as a pass rusher. He adds the value as being somebody that can kind of cover a little bit. But also a big reason why Snowden hasn't been coming up as much as he normally does is because this guy right here, Mr. Carson Taylor, the undrafted rookie free agent out of Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona just, I remember my brother and I, we would always play the old college games, and we'd always take a crappy college and we'd try to make them good. Northern Arizona one year was that, because we're like, who the heck knows what Northern Arizona is? Who's ever heard of these guys? But we picked somebody up as an undrafted free agent. Carson Taylor, 6'4", 251, gives you that NFL size. And honestly, watching his tape, it's impressive. He has NFL speed. He's got NFL size, but he doesn't have NFL production right now. He only played 3 games in 2021 and 5 games in 2020 and then 12 in 2019. He has only 14 career sacks with 5 years played, yet again kind of banged up the last 2 seasons. But I heard some people from Northern Arizona, they were talking about it, saying this guy is a legit player. Whenever he was healthy, he seemed to be wrecking havoc. And you watch the tape on it, I don't have it right now, but when you watch the tape, you go, who is this guy? He seems legit. He seems great. But yet again, another physical specimen that's turning heads in OTAs. Let's get the pads on him. We got to see this. Is he going to be a true diamond, or is he going to be one of those guys we say, remember that one undrafted free agent out of Northern Arizona that we heard a little bit about? Yeah, whatever happened to him? So that's another guy in the preseason that we'll probably want to keep an eye out for in training camp. I'm going to try and get there so I can kind of see how does he actually play, because like I said, seems to be turning heads a little bit more than a Sam Kamara, who never was the flashiest of players, and Charles Snowden, who never seemed to kind of take that next step. So right now we have some people turning heads. And like I said, Snowden so far hasn't been, which is unfortunate because I really like Charles Snowden. I really liked him coming out, and I remember hearing interviews with him, and he just seems like a really good dude that you always want to root for. So that's pretty much the depth chart and who we have on this team. So Robert Quinn, starter, Muhammad and Gipson battling out for that next edge spot. Dominique Robinson turning a lot of heads, and Carson Taylor as well turning heads out there. But one thing just to kind of bring up, and I talked about this during the Robert Quinn show as well, is that we should also consider that if Robert Quinn gets traded, there's a lot of good veterans out there that we could add in. I think if Robert Quinn is on this team, we don't need to because we have Muhammad and Gipson. But if Quinn is gone, add in a couple different people that can kind of provide some depth so that you have some fresh horses out there, everybody getting, 500 snaps a year, and just kind of keep the pressure, like a Justin Houston, Carl Nassib, a couple players like that could really add a little bit of extra depth if you end up trading a Robert Quinn. But let's go over to our over-unders, because that's about it from the previews perspective. So now, over-unders for 2022. So last year, the Bears' edges got a total of 32.5 sacks. Even without Khalil Mack, they still had 32.5 sacks. I mean, he did play a handful of games. I think he got 6 or 7 sacks in there in about 6 or 7 games. But 32.5 sacks is really good. That's a really good number. And honestly, I think it's going to be under. I think overall, Robert Quinn had an incredible year last year. And I don't think he's going to reproduce that statistically. I don't think he's going to get 18.5 sacks. And if you do, that's going to be crazy. If somebody like him at his age can reproduce that's abnormal. So to me, I still think that Quinn's going to do well. I think that Gipson's going to do well. The thing that I get nervous about is, how much are they going to play Al-Quadin Muhammad? Because he's not going to get a lot of sacks out there. So I do think that sack number is going to be at the under, just because you are missing some more of those extra players, and you are missing Khalil Mack. He was there for a good chunk of games, and that does help out everybody as a whole. Now, the next one, I didn't like as I was typing this up because this one is difficult. The next over-under is Robert Quinn going to be on the team on November 1st? Past that or before that? Because this is the big question. Is he going to be on the team after the trade deadline? And to me, I'm saying no. I don't think he's going to be on this team after the trade deadline. Even though that as I'm saying that, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. It feels like, they'll just smooth it over. But I do think if you are starting your own culture, your own team, you might want to get rid of the squeaky wheel. And that's why I think that the Bears are probably going to move him, because we've talked about this before on different episodes. If this is a rebuild, which it is, you got rid of the coaching staff, you got rid of the GMs, you got rid of a good chunk of players and you're rebuilding this thing. Why not start with another veteran? Get younger there, or get some, like I mentioned, some veterans that can at least kind of give you a positive level of play until you replace that with somebody younger, with somebody that you want long-term the following season. So I think that Quinn's gone. Let me know what you think, because I feel like it's 50-50 right about now if he's actually going to stay or if he's actually going to be here. But the next one is Trevis Gipson starts. So I have the number at 9 because that's what he had last year. Keep in mind, too, Bruce Irvin, when we picked him up off the street, they were even saying, you're going to start over Trevis Gipson. That's what the coaching staff thought of him, especially from the running game. You knew that he could rush the passer, but is he going to be taking a step forward? And I think this is a bit of an enigma, because is he a starter if he's just a third down or second down guy? Or is he considered a starter because he's playing bulk of the snaps? I want to say yes, because to me, if Gipson is starting, I think that there's such a higher ceiling, and I want to see the production out of him. So I'm going to say over. I'm going to say over 9, because I hope that he's getting that. And if Robert Quinn is gone, maybe they don't sign a veteran and they just say, we got 2 edge guys. Dominique Robinson, you got to step up. So it'll be interesting, but I do hope that Gipson is going to start more than 9 games. Let me know down in the comments as well if you're watching on YouTube. And the last one, 9 forced fumbles. That's a lot from last season. Do I think that they're going to match that? And I'm going to say under. I think that we might get like 7, might get 8. I still think we're going to be stripping the football. But when you have Quinn getting, I think, 4 and Gipson getting about 5, that's a lot. That's a lot between just 2 position groups. It's not as the entire defensive unit. This is just for the edges. And I think for the edges, that I think that we're going to do under for the sacks and under for forced fumbles, specifically speaking about the edges, because I thought we did very well last year, even without Khalil Mack. So now it comes down to the big question, the moment you've all been waiting for. Did we get better? And you might already know the answer to this, but I do think that Robert Quinn, like I said, it's regression to the mean. It's not saying the wheels are falling off and he's getting 2 sacks again. It's saying getting the production of 18.5 sacks is very hard to get. I think he's going to take a little step back, kind of regress back to the mean, to the average. And then I think, too, when you look at what we had last year with the Khalil Mack, when Khalil Mack was healthy or slightly banged up, he was still a very good force. And because of that, we definitely took a step back on the other side, even though I do think Trevis Gipson is going to be taking a step forward and is going to be a better player. So I think with a regressing Robert Quinn, regressing back to the mean, and Trevis Gipson being better, but when you factor in you have to replace Khalil Mack, I think no matter how you slice it, this position group did get worse, but I still think it's a solid position group as long as Trevis Gipson is the starter. That's my take. I am a big Trevis Gipson fan. Love what he's been putting out there, and I love Thor. I love Marvel movies, and since he's takes the Thor hammer, slams it down, he's got a sweet spot in my heart for him doing that. But let me know what you think. Put it down in the comments. Love to hear you guys' opinions about this position. And thank you guys all so much for watching. And Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.